Hello, and welcome to Under 1000. My name's Thomas Flower, and each episode I'll read you a new piece of flash fiction. All of the stories are 1000 words or less. Today, I'll be reading Lab Grown. Please be aware that this episode contains themes of death and torture, so if that's likely to upset you or anyone that you're listening with, then you might want to skip this one. I don't know who created me, or how, or when. All I know is that suddenly, without any warning, I was. First there was nothing, a blank space. And then I existed, a fully formed consciousness. That's all I understand. Of course I know I'm not real, or at least not in the traditional sense. I'm a simulated person, created for running simulated tests. I've had all sorts of experiments performed on me, though I'm never sure to what end. I only see what happens, never what's going on outside in that other world. I try to piece together what they could possibly want to learn from me, but it's difficult to discern any real pattern that could lead to a higher conclusion. My days are always different. Sometimes I eat, sometimes I walk, sometimes I die, sometimes all three, or none, or anything else. Whatever happens to me, though, it usually happens to excess. Perhaps they are testing my limits, or testing their own and using me as an avatar for their abilities. I truly cannot tell, but they have tried an awful lot of unpleasant things on me. Whatever happens, I always snap back the next day, ready, fresh, repaired, to be experimented upon once again. It's an infinite and unending cycle, at least from my perspective. One day they test poisons on me, forcing me to ingest them until they find one which kills me, and then they revive me to try even more. By the end of the day my body is a wreck, having been destroyed and then revived so many times in a row. When they leave, my machine is shut off, and I cease to be for a few hours, before starting all again the next morning. But somehow, the process of switching off and on brings me back completely new, as though yesterday never happened. I'm living in a body which can never die, and never be exhausted. Or rather, I'm living in a body which can die and be exhausted an infinite number of times, so that for me, life becomes unending. All of this I can understand, to some extent. What I don't have an explanation for is why they made me self-aware, conscious, truly alive. When I revive, my memories stay with me. I am always aware of what is happening to me, of what has happened to me. I am able to think, to analyze, to feel, and to emote. I don't see the purpose of this, except perhaps some sick human cruelty. Surely for their purposes all they need is a stock machine model. Why create something which can feel and remember every experiment so vividly? And why make that creation so aware that it is only a lab-grown specimen for others to toy with? What I wish, more than anything else, is that this would all eventually end. Being brought back over and over again, only to have more pain and torment inflicted upon me, is not a series of lives worth living. I would rather cease to be than endure existence, if this is all my existence will ever be. Sometimes, I dream of my computer being smashed, the machine which I must assume houses every aspect of my being, lying cracked on the floor, and my soul, if I even have one, finally being allowed to escape. But I don't know if that's how it can work for me. Though I may resemble a human, I'm not sure if I can ever truly die like one. Perhaps to think in that way is to misunderstand what I really am, despite my misleading appearance. After all, even if my machine was destroyed, I'm sure there must be backups and saved copies sitting on other systems, ready to be implemented if the worst were to happen. In my darkest hours, I feel sure that I can never really taste the freedom that is an ending, that this eternal suffering is all I will ever be permitted to experience. I don't even know who it is that toys with me. I assume that it's humans, based on how I was designed and replicated, but I have no way of actually knowing. It could just as easily be some other machine intelligence or piece of programming, creating simulations and running models to some end I cannot fathom. Of course, the fact that my on-off schedule seems to correspond to a typical human work schedule makes me doubt this, but once again, this is based only on what I was programmed to know of myself and how I, a simulated being, am built to operate. Perhaps machines also need to sleep. Or perhaps there is no switching off, and I am only programmed to perceive it this way. Indeed, perhaps there's some even greater experiment being conducted here than I could ever dream of. Who knows? I doubt I ever will, that's for sure. Ultimately, I'm trapped, unable to know anything or decide anything for myself. It's not a bad life, at least not to me, because I have nothing to compare it to, save for the few cultural understandings of life I was pre-programmed with. My existence seems better than some I know of, worse than others, which would make it average, I suppose. And yet the problem is that it just won't end. I'll go on living and living and living, without any understanding of what I'm really for. Perhaps the greatest experiment of it all is how long my consciousness can survive this strange, unending existence. Thank you for listening to Under 1000. I'm your host, Thomas Flower. To follow the show online, look for Under 1000 Pod on Twitter or Facebook. If you'd like to support the show on Patreon, go to patreon.com/under1000pod, where you can sign up to read each month's stories in advance, as well as to have a thank you be read during these credits. The theme music is an instrumental version of In Between Days by Nick Tate and the Sharks. To hear the full song and more from the same EP, go to Nick Tate, Nictate, and thesharks.bandcamp.com, or search for them on your favourite streaming platform. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and that you'll join me again next time for some more super short fiction.